welcome to another episode of the Aligned as Fuck podcast. I cannot tell you, I am over the moon with my guest that is joining us today. We're going to have another raw, real, gritty, vulnerable, wide open riff session. I have no idea again where this conversation is going to go, especially because this is a dear friend of mine and I know the power of our conversations, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to invite her into the space, onto the show. I want you to get to know her. And there's always this delicious magic that comes up in whatever we talk about. And so first and foremost, let me just welcome and say hello to my dear friend, Yvonne Heath. Welcome, 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 welcome to my show.
Thank you, my beautiful friend. And we have an amazing heart connection. So I'm always thrilled to just show up here. See what I did there? Just show up. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And we're gonna get into all kinds of juicy stuff. I already know that. We've had, in fact, the last time we had a conversation, we were like, oh my God, we should have recorded all of this. We should have been on a space. And I will tell you, it's taken almost a divine act of God for us to get on this call, which is also something I think we might want to hit on because there has been no force. We have allowed it to show up when it needed to. And we've had several things we've bumped against just to make this happen today. This was supposed to happen months ago, weeks ago, and here we are. And so it is with great purpose. And I know that the stars are aligned and the energy is fully connected to us today. And so I cannot wait to see what comes out of this. Before we do that, let me do the official, tell you who Yvonne is. I can tell you all the fabulous things about her, but let me tell you some of her credentials. Yvonne is a registered nurse since 1988. And for those of you that want to do math, that's a really long time. I just want you to realize somebody posted the other day, by the way, I'm going down tangents. Somebody posted the other day that 1993 was 30 years ago. I had to sit down for a minute. I know I'm going to be 50 this year, but the idea that 1993 was 30 years ago, my little brain is really struggling to wrap around that. So when I hear that Yvonne's been a nurse since 1988, y'all can do the math. She has worked in the United States and Canada in many areas, including emergency chemotherapy, palliative care, and hospice. She became disheartened by our society's reluctance to talk about, plan, and prepare for grief, transitions, and end of life. And I can already feel the emotions coming up because I can tell we're going to have some serious conversation and some playful conversation, which I know sounds really weird, around grief. And it's one of the things that Yvonne brings to the table when we get into this subject, and I'll talk about that in a minute, which is causing excessive suffering, for sure. She suffered too, not knowing how to do it differently. In 2015, she blazed a new trail and founded Love Your Life to Death, followed by the I Just Showed Up movement. I'm already getting chills. Creating social change. She shares her message with heart and humor. So I want you to think about that for a minute. Grief. Let's talk about grief with heart and humor. Oh, it's so delicious. As a consultant speaker and her book programs and as a television host. In 2019, she delivered her TEDx talk, Transforming Our Grief Just by Showing Up. Or by just showing up. She is most passionate about supporting the supporters and their compassionate communities, especially helping and caring for our seniors. When she is not traveling, Yvonne can be found wearing socks and sandals in her happy place in Huntsville, Ontario, with her husband, who is also a freaking rock star. I love Jordy. Twins and several pets. So that being said, let's get right in, because I want to talk a little bit about, first of all, I mean, how badass is that? That is like the coolest bio ever. And again, just welcome to the show.
Thank you. So let me just say two things about my bio, which is super fun facts. So somebody told me I needed to let people know when I say registered nurse, when I transitioned to this new career, I left my nursing career, which is like terrifying, and there was tremendous grief in that. And I know that 1993 is 30 years ago, because my older son will be 30 this year, who was born in Corpus Christi, Texas.
Oh, nice little, I like that little thing, right? And holy shit, you're not looking for a 30-year-old child. I'm just saying, because I'm not, and I'm just putting that out there. So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about that transition. Let's jump right into the conversation around grief, because what your experience has been with grief and what you do in the space of grief is really, truly something that is not It is a brand new, it is a whole different way to approach the subject. And so let's just start there. Let's just jump in and
I love
talk
it.
about what that transition was for you and how
Mhm.
you got to this point. I want to
Mhm.
start and let people know because the bio is great, but I want to hear your story.
Well, and thanks for that, Candy, because it is just so, first of all, it's so amazing that when these tragic, as we see tragic, traumatic, life-changing, life-altering things happen in our lives, we can't possibly imagine that something good will come from it, right? And like we just can't. We are just consumed by grief, and we don't even understand how we feel, and it's raw and it's confusing, and one minute you're fine, one minute you're not, and you just are just it really just is shocking
Yeah.
how grief can hit you. And most of us think, we're going to grieve, and when somebody dies, and we'll be sad, and then we'll move past our grief and we'll move forward, right? So that's, and in my 27-year nursing career, I will say that I believe that we think that healthcare professionals are magically really good at this. And so we're navigating, yeah, right. Haha. Navigating grief personally at times, helping people in probably the hardest times of their lives, in on the hardest day of their lives. And we just, for the most part, pretend we're fine, and brush it off, and we check in, right? Oh, how are you doing? That was hard. Candy, you okay? Oh, yeah, I'm fine, thanks. And you put the check mark. I checked in. And so I did that for many years. And many people have seen the movie Patch Adams, where Robin Williams starred as the doctor, Dr. Patch Adams, who is my friend. P.S. The real
Oh,
Patch Adams. If you haven't seen the movie, you have to see it. So hence the, like, I would bring heart and humor. I'm very silly. I can be very silly. There's a picture there with me dressed in like clown and silly, and I dressed like that in chemo and in Emerge because it was already serious enough. I just didn't have the coping skills and strategies to navigate the intense pain that I was feeling and others were feeling.
yeah.
But I just carried on. And it was amazing because when our older son was 16, he had tremendous grief where his dreams of being a snowboarder were shattered with an injury, and he spiraled down a dangerous road of drugs and addiction. And what I realized, first of all, I felt shattered in a million pieces. He is still with us, but at that time I thought I could outlive my child. And we had this long journey. I was a single parent for a long time. Then I met the love of my life, Jordy, who was much younger, and we were just going to flirt. It wasn't going to go anywhere. And now we're going to celebrate our 20th anniversary, and we have 18-year-old twins. However, in that moment, I just thought, I don't think I would survive that. And I don't know what to do with this excruciating pain. And I didn't know how to save this child. And what I realized, the big thing, was that my people, my tribe, the people that I thought would be there to support me, were avoiding me.
Yep.
Because they didn't know what to do, and they didn't know what to say. It was awkward and it was uncomfortable. And then we had twins, and I was going to work in chemotherapy, and kind of checking my personal baggage at the door, and no one was asking me how I was doing. And I just thought, what is wrong with this picture? And it was like this cumulative effect of grief and pretending I was fine all these years, right? And then so I just kind of stepped back and I said, are we healthcare professionals well prepared for grief, transitions, death, dying, and how to support one another? And they're all like, oh God, we're terrible at it. Like, go start that IV. Why you, it's just the way it is. Right? Ooh. Jordy says, oh my God, did they say
Develop
that
a
to your
tough
face?
skin. Don't let it get to you. You're not supposed to internalize it.
Move on.
Take it home with you. Don't, it's not yours to carry. Like there's a way that we get to just put it in and I know this because sometimes you feel this even as a coach sometimes, right?
Absolutely.
We are human beings having a human experience, which says there is a level of empathy. If anyone that is not a narcissist or a complete psychopath, we have a level of empathy regardless of how we're wired. that we naturally take on other people's pain and energy. And when we keep telling ourselves to toughen up or to suck it up or to say, okay, well, that's not mine, I'm just going to leave it there, I'm not going to bring it home with me, we're completely bullshitting ourselves, because to your point, it starts to build up. And it has a pressure point at some point that becomes, and many times I've seen it for myself and I've seen it for other people, it becomes an implosion point, right? It becomes
Absolutely.
a place where you cannot hold the grief of your own grief. Because the thing is we don't acknowledge, especially if you're a type A superhero, badass, I get it done, highly driven, successful by the metric of whatever the hell we call successful in our society. You show up and people are like, she's got her shit figured out. And underneath, like,
but we're pretending that too, right? We're pretending that we do.
Yeah, because this is one of the reasons I love our friendship, because I will even say, and you and everybody knows, well, they should, anyone in my orbit knows, I have been going through massive grief right now. And we all have levels of grief. I've been going through grief my whole life. I mean, let's be clear, we all have grief, right? The grief that I've been going through over the last almost 100 days, tomorrow makes 100 days. My soul, one of my soul, heart, everything, I lost Peyton, right? And so there is a space where my assistant put this out once, and I think this is a good place to dig into. There was a meme she shared on my behalf to kind of, because I've been communicating, and there's been a lot of people that have a lot of things to say, a lot about things, and I really don't fucking care, because my way of healing is I've got to express it. I don't want to build it up in my body, because it starts to ricochet around and you do create that implosion point, right? And she had put a meme out. She says, you're allowed to grieve as long as it's socially acceptable.
Oh God! Oh, somebody wrote that. I was thinking.
Yeah, well, my assistant,
that was not your
like, as a meme.
Yeah.
We're allowed to grieve as long as others are comfortable with it. As long as and think about that. That is the culture we have. And honestly, the word grief in and of itself is such a triggering, because we have not been taught even effectively on any level to feel our emotions. I mean, as a child, we get told to suck it up. As a child, we get told to rub some dirt in it. Like, tears are like, we're so afraid of the tears.
Oh, Candy, my God. Let's
unpack all this, right? Let's unpack it.
So I have to go back to what you were saying about empathy, and it's a yes and. And I learned that a yes and, when you say, like highly sensitive people, empaths, people who are in the healing, the healing industry, like we're just called to that level, right? Where we want to help people. We have no choice. That's who we are. The empathy, as Brene Brown says, like, sympathy is feeling sorry for, empathy is feeling with, compassion is like empathy in motion, like we want to do something. When we talk about feeling with, we do not have to take on their pain, right, to feel with them, to have empathy, to love and support them. We don't know how to not do that. And that's why I suffered. That's why coaches suffer. And my whole thing is, it is because we have normalized a lot of the wrong stuff. We have normalized being tough, putting it aside, and we are not proactive. We have no proactive coping skills, strategies. What do we believe about life and death? Who can allow me to just be my authentic, vulnerable, hot, messy self? We are reactive. And what you were talking about, when you have to express, that is one of the only path to healing, is my friend Maria Kleefkoff of healthymorning.ca. She's amazing, or .com, whatever, Healthy Morning. Her revolution is helping us understand that grief is like that internal, mental, physical, emotional reaction to loss, transitions, change. Mourning is that external expression of it. Right. And that's what society's not comfortable with. We'll let you grieve very quietly at home. Please don't come out.
Even that, I would offer that I'm not even sure we allow that. truthfully.
Oh, well, we
Because
don't want to be a part
the
of
two
it.
things that you said, and I do want to interject something here, because one of the things, and I think there, and there was a really, I saw this once, it was a statement, and I don't know if it came from Brene Brown, because I love Brene's work. I do love Brene's work, and so on point, right? Sympathy is an enabling space. Empathy is an action oriented. Like, what do you need? It's a support space. But what I love is I heard a quote once that said, there's a big difference between caring and carrying. And that why difference, right? And we have been so twofold in what you just said. We have been taught, first of all, oh my God, it's our responsibility. I got to fix it. We have a culture that wants to fix it. We don't know how to sit in and just hold space. Because honestly, like, one of the biggest things I've realized I've needed through the grief is the check-ins are nice when they're like really somebody. I just love the space of, and you did this beautifully with me, holding space, letting me cry and not saying a fucking word. I just want to know somebody can be in the pain with me, because I would say that even when you say, oh, you can grieve alone, I would tell you that our culture doesn't even say that's acceptable. Oh, then something's wrong with you. You're broken. Oh my God, you got mental health issues. How dare you? What, you sit at home and just like sit in your house and cry? We have so much shaming and judgment. And we're in this space where we're so uncomfortable with the idea of grief that, like, we just want, in every way capacity, we don't want to hear about it. We want to brush it off. We want to push it away. And oh my God, aren't you a hot mess? If somebody openly says, I sobbed my eyes out, I can't help it. I had just the other day, 2 nights ago, I just overwhelming grief again, that just, I miss my baby boy. I miss him. And yet there are aspects of that I can feel, even the voice that's like, seriously, here we go again. You're just at home crying like a big, like, there's something wrong with it. We have this conditioning that says, I wouldn't tell anybody that, because even you crying at home, that's just like, seriously, you need to like get to a place where you can suck that up. You can push it out. Grief doesn't work like that. And the last thing I want to say to what you just said was, grief needs to, and one of the things I've really learned, especially in grieving Peyton, grief needs to and demands being heard and seen. It demands it. The only way I can get it out of my body and breathe, I cannot breathe until I put it, like, express the magnitude of it. It's why I've been doing so many posts. It's why I share videos. It's why I let myself why we're having this conversation. Because I've realized without that expression, grief feels like it's being shamed. And then it's getting stuck. And all it says is, please just recognize me. Please just let me be seen and heard. You don't fucking have to do anything, but just give me a space to be seen.
Let's take a moment.
Let's
just take a moment, because there is so much in there. And there's so much to learn from our grief, and we are our own grief expert. Just like when people call me a grief expert, I say, I am not a grief expert. I am someone who is passionate about normalizing the right things. I am passionate about helping people to become more proactive, to learn, wow, these incredible lessons from their grief, their pain, and get to the now what when they're ready. That doesn't mean the grief is gone. That means as you navigate this journey of love and grief, because grief is just love. Like you don't grieve if you didn't absolutely love. And let's do both, right? When you're ready to grieve, and because here's the thing, grief and joy can coexist. Grief and living can coexist. Grief and learning can coexist. So when someone's ready, I believe that we are okay with someone grieving, for a very short time. Here's the thing though, Candy, here's the thing that I became very anxious and angry in my career, because I worked in chemotherapy and people were dying and we were not having real conversations, not because we weren't compassionate, because it's uncomfortable. Like, don't wait for it to be comfortable. And the other thing is, I mean, my God, don't wait for it to be
comfortable. It'll never be comfortable. It's not supposed to be comfortable.
It's so uncomfortable. But here's the thing. How do we get good or better at anything? How do we learn to navigate things? We practice. We practice and we learn. Our son is a phenomenal volleyball player, which is so cute because all he ever did was play Lego, and we never was like, oh, that's a big surprise. But he got really tall and he can hit a volleyball. So what did he do? He practiced. He failed. He did the wrong thing. He got it out of bounds. He asked his coach. He read about it. He learned. What do we do when it comes to understanding grief, understanding or talking about death and dying? What do? We avoid it because we're terrified, and then we react when it happens because we will all face it. And I say, like, us poor beautiful compassionate people who are too terrified because they don't know what to do and they don't know what to say. And that is what I want to change. There is no fixing grief. And we also believe that we need to leave it to the professionals, right? Someone is grieving, let's get them a grief counselor. And again, that's a yes and. Right. The professionals will be a part of our journey about 10% of the time or less. Now, I need everyone to hear that, yep. Right? I said that in my TEDx talk because when you are consumed with grief and you're just shocked by grief and it's stopping you in your tracks and the rest of life is carrying on and you're like, hello, I'm grieving here. Right. If you have a wonderful person that you can talk to, amazing. Will that be 1 hour a week for 6 weeks? There are 24 hours in a day. And your grief doesn't go away after 6 weeks.
No.
So this is about reframing. It's like, I want to hit the reset button and say, we have been led down this path to medicalize, sanitize, professionalize life, grief, and death. Of course, we don't know what to do, and we don't know what to do. We don't have these conversations before, during, and always. Yeah. So let's get to the now what.
Yeah. Well, right? Let's talk about the now what, because the thing that's popping up for me as you say that, I mean, grief is messy. It's not linear. I've said this, I'm so not a linear person anyway. So of course grief wouldn't be linear. Grief has, and I saw a really interesting visualization, because a lot of things, when you're in something that you keep calling more of that to you. And so there's been a lot of things resource wise. And of course, when you're ready for it, the students ready, the teachers appear, right? And teachers can show up in a lot of different ways. And it's one of the things I love about social media. While there's a lot I don't like about social media, is especially when you curate who you follow and where you get your inspiration, there's some really powerful things that can drop in, especially on things like Instagram when there's visuals. And I saw, it was actually a reel I saw the other day that someone had described that if you can look at grief, and this was something I think was interesting, because I want to lean in a little bit about how you help people consider sitting with their grief. And I also love that you're like, I'm not an expert. I really look at you as a guide. I look at you as someone who is here to offer some different perspectives, because grief is a very personal journey, and it is part of your spiritual path that only you can decide what it looks like. I'm very clear about that. No one, and I've felt myself feel the resistance around it. No one gets to tell me how to grieve. I appreciate and love and have so much just thank you for all the people like, oh, you need to do this EFT, or you need to do that. Great. I am aware of all the modalities and tools. And right now that is not what is calling through me, because one of the things I want to say in that is stop trying to rush people through their grief. I don't want the modalities right now. I want to feel the fullness of this so that I can take the beautiful gifts that are presenting as a result. Because I want to talk about the juxtaposition in just a minute, that space of grief and joy, that space of beautiful in the mess, right? And so anyway, I saw this reel where they had basically a panic. It wasn't really, it was a pain button. And the button is like a certain size and it doesn't change. There's a pain button. And when the grief first hits, there is this huge ball that is literally pressing on the pain button. And so you're feeling the grief in every moment, every breath. It's intense, especially because when you recognize that grief, and I love the quote that says, grief is love that's been unexpressed. It's that it is love. You do not grieve things you do not care about. Who gives a rat's ass? Okay. I mean, like, no disrespect, but there's things like, I'm sorry to hear, I'm sorry for your loss, but it doesn't affect me, right? Grief happens because you were connected. You had connection. You had love. You had a place, that person whatever had a space in your beingness. They took up space in your soul. They are part of who you are, how you show up. Like they affected that. So that grief comes from a place of, look, that person had a space in this being of my light, right? And so I loved it because this pain button, they showed the visual was this big, huge ball that's constantly pressing on it. What happens, and what I loved about this as a visual, was that over time the ball gets smaller, but it doesn't go away. That being said, the pain button never shrinks. And so what happens is that ball starts to move in the container, where there are days where it doesn't come near the pain button. It doesn't come, but when it hits the pain button hasn't changed. So it doesn't matter the size of the ball. When the ball hits the pain button, the grief feels the same. It's got that intensity again, right? And it's why 100 days later I can have that ball come down and it takes me out. And I was like, what a perfect visual, at least in my mind, to help describe the function of grief. That it's not about getting rid of grief. The grief is not going to go away. It is something that is part of, it is now part of the journey. And so the work you do, the way you show up in this space, is to bring this element of fun and joy and a real juxtaposition. I mean, grief has this whole energy to it that, we avoid it. We think it's the plague. We don't want anything to do with it. We want to punch it in the face. We want to stuff it down. We want to run away from it. We're constantly putting this resistant energy on. Oh my God, it's so scary. And I feel, and this is one of the reasons I've been so adamant, because I even had somebody say, Candy, you don't need to be sharing your journey. Why don't you just grieve? I'm like, I'm sharing this journey because it, first of all, needs to be seen and expressed. Second of all, as a teacher and guide, and that is what calls through me in every breath I take. It is how I am wired. I'm a 6-2 manifesting generator. I am here to teach from the wisdom I've learned from my experiences. It is my gift. It is my light. It is what is calling me. I share it because I want you to recognize that grief needs a space, first of all. And if I can help someone give themselves permission to realize it's not about pushing it away. It's about letting yourself be in all of it. So let's talk about all of it. How can I be in the immense? And it is immense. I went on the trail again because I wanted to see the damage from the ice storm around here. And I haven't been on trail. And mind you, I haven't been on Peyton and my trails, but maybe 3-4 times since his death. One was with a friend. I have not been, it's hard. And I started crying on the trail. It was the day that I got really emotional. It was 2 days ago. I even did a little video where that video is just for Peyton. I just spoke it into the ethers. And I got very sad because he's not there to experience that with me. And it was so beautiful. And it was so deeply fulfilling, and it was magical. And there's times when I go on that trail where, while I am grieving him deeply, I feel him, his energy, his love, his joy, just as deeply. And so let's talk about that a little bit as I start becoming a crying mess right now, which I knew this was going to happen.
Well, here's the
Peyton and not cry. And I love my tears. I absolutely love that I am an emotional being. I've embraced that. I love my tears. I welcome my tears. And it means I'm connected into my life. But let's talk about that, because you do such beautiful work. I purposely did not put on eye makeup for this.
So what you're sharing, and thank you for sharing that. And it's heartwarming and heart-wrenching, right? And the joy and the funniness that I bring in is that I say, when someone says, oh, I'm sorry, I'm crying, and which you did not, but people often say, and I say, oh, well, we never, you're crying because you're sad and you loved. You never have to apologize for your tears. And just so you know, I'm mandated to make at least one person cry a day. So thank you. I can check that off. Let's move on. Right?
I say that too.
Yeah. Okay. Candy for today. Perfect. So here's the thing. And I just want to clarify for people that may not know who Peyton is to you. And I love you're talking about your baby boy. And if people don't know you, it's like, oh my gosh, your child died. And Peyton was your dog, is your dog, your soulmate. And it's interesting because when I first, and I shared this with you before, I first saw you and Peyton, and I knew, and I saw Peyton's little gray whiskers, and in the back of my head, I thought, I wonder how old Peyton is. And I just thought, ooh, this will be a big grief journey for Candy. And I just had it in the back there, and we've had conversations about grief. And here's the other piece about grief in our society. And again, you know, I say all this with love, and the fact that we don't have these conversations, and we don't say, you know, you don't need to have a PhD to love and support someone. Good news is, when you are loving and support, you don't need, there's no fixing it.
Right.
And if we could, you know, take that burden off of people, if we create that excessive suffering when we want to fix it, and then so we avoid, and then we try to say something brilliant, and oh, you know, he's in a better place, or we try to fix it, oh, you can get another dog, and all these things. And the other piece where we create excessive suffering for ourselves and others is the comparing and judging. It's like, oh, it was a dog, or oh my God, it was your parent, and you're devastated. Well, here's two things, and this is, I should put the dog there now, the elephant in the room, but we're talking about dogs. There are many people that are closer to their pets than their families. Like, that is just a fact. That is just a fact. And so a beautiful thing that we can come to the table with is curiosity versus fixing. Let's just get curious. Like, oh, and that's the first thing, like, when, you know, speaking, and it's, stories are the perfect way, and I have a gazillion of them. Speaking to this woman, her dad was a chemo patient of mine. I knew her, I knew their story, and he had been very abusive her whole life. And he came back to town because he wanted her to help him through this. And it's like, are you kidding me? And it was so toxic. And when he died, she felt relief, and there was grief of the dad she wished she had. Yep. That's what she grieved. But she said, as far as this person, and I said, yeah, I understand. And you're allowed, your journey is your journey. There's no, you know, and everyone, oh my God, your dad died, I'm sorry for your loss. Now, I know this same person, when her dog dies, like, there will be excruciating grief.
Well, and it's interesting because that is exactly my story. My dad and I cut my dad out 15 years prior to his death. When he died, I wanted nothing. When he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and liver cancer, I still did not lean in. It was very, very toxic, abusive relationship with my dad growing up. And I got to a point at 22 where I realized that the only way I could heal in my journey was to literally extract him out of my life. And so it was interesting because for years it got really hard because, again, the judgment that shows up in the shaming, people would ask too many questions about my dad that I started saying he had passed way before he did, because it was actually just easier. It was easier to just put a pin in it. And so it was interesting because when he did pass, and I knew it, I knew the night before he was going to pass. And in fact, I had a complete breakdown. I found old journals from when I was 15, journal entries that I've always had that sort of premonition way of, I write things that, like, later on in my life end up becoming cathartic cleanses when I'm ready to receive them. So I've always had this ability in my poetry, in my journaling, in my writing, that oftentimes I will write things. In fact, I have a poem about my dad called The Sea, where I wrote it my junior year of high school. And I still remember a teacher who embarrassed the shit out of me, making me read it in front of class, and then tried to tell me what it was about. And I'm like, that's not what it's about. But
she was telling you what your poem was about?
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah. But I didn't know what it was about. I just knew what it wasn't. It was 4 years after college. So I wrote this my junior year in high school. It was 4 years after college that I went through some of my old poems. And I still have the original one that in pencil on the top, I went, oh my God, this is my relationship with Dad. And it changed. And it was when I was ready to receive it. And it was around the time where I cut him out of my life, 22, right? Because when you think about it, it was beyond that. It was when I was able to sit with and heal, because there was a lot of grief in him not being. So like I said, I've had a long history with grief. I've had a lot of shit show up in my life. It's part of the 6th line in my human design. And I understand that. I've had some really hard things to go through. And yes, we can get in the comparison and go, because I used to be one of those, but my life's not as bad as other people. That's fucking bullshit. Stop doing that, because it's not about, your pain is real. Your suffering is real. And there is no, like, spectrum of my pain is only worth this, where their pain, because they bullshit. Pain is pain. And honor the fucking pain, because I'm so tired of people being in a space that this judgment is part of what is wrong, or part of what we have the opportunity to let go of. Not to say wrong, because I really don't like right.
Because that's very judgy.
Yeah, I don't like right and wrong.
I'm
So
teasing
it's a
you.
space that's not serving us. And we have the opportunity to realize that pain is pain, suffering is suffering. And every one of us has a different journey through the pain, the grief, the suffering that we're here to do. And so my dad, it'll be 13. Wow. It'll be 13 years this June that he passed. And when he passed, I remember my brother and I even had a bit of some contention. He's like, you don't get to grieve this, because you weren't. I said, I get to do whatever I want. And my story, and it was not grieving, because I felt a sense of incredible. In fact, my brother got really upset in this, and we had to work through some stuff, because I said, I feel like I finally can have the level of love and relationships that I need. And this is where I'm going to get really emotional, because there's a reason why I'm saying this connection point, that I can't have the loving relationships in my life I need until he was gone from this earth. I really felt that there was an energy that was holding me back. And my brother said, oh, it's all about you. I said, that's not what I said. And that's not what I'm trying to convey. But there was a breath that I hadn't been able to take for, most of my life.
Wow. He had a lot of
Because I was
power.
so afraid that I might run into my dad on the street, even though he was in Philadelphia and I was in Wisconsin. Like, there was just this fear of where he was just going to show up in my life, and this energy. And so after my dad passed, I got into the first and only real healthy relationship I ever had with a man who really knew how to hold space and be that healthy masculine. He had a dog I fell in love with. And when we split, and there was reasons, we just weren't each other's person, I still have an incredible amount of love and respect for this human being. I think he's just a light, and we healed a lot of things for each other. He healed a pattern of really shitty relationships, and I healed I get to love this big and know that someone can hold that space. And in fact, he met his now wife and has an adopted daughter since that space, and all with purpose. It opened up the portal for me to adopt Peyton, because 2 months after we split is when I finally realized I had too much love. So Peyton was, and has been, and continues to be, what's the word? The light that has helped me through the biggest aspect of my healing journey. Because while I went through a lot of processing in my 20s and my 30s and my 40s around stuff with my dad, there's a lot that was tethered there.
Yeah.
My love and relationship with Peyton, my dog.
Yeah.
Anyone that wants to tell me it's just a dog, just be careful. I'll probably throw.
Oh, I know. That's just
to say. He was what God sent me, because even the way Peyton and I connected, I adopted him sight unseen. A friend connected me to a organization called Dog Guardians. They were people that went into kill shelters to rescue dogs. Right. When I heard about Peyton, he was in North Carolina, I was in Wisconsin. He had 3 days left in a kill shelter.
Wow. You saved each other.
Sight unseen. And when they brought him in, there were 4 or 5 other adults in the room. I had to go outside of Chicago. He came in and came, like, he's a people person, and went all past everyone, came right to me, came in between my legs, and put his head on my thigh. And I just
found each other.
You were a God thing. And I say that because there's a whole nother level of healing that now has shown up to grieve. He helped me start my business. We moved to, he's done every major transition in my journey. He was part of my business. My clients have specific memories they pull out about how Peyton affected them or changed them. He was an empath. He was a healer.
Right. Beautiful.
I say that because it's interesting when you look at, again, grief isn't linear, and grief has, in my mind, has this connection thread that allows us, if we choose, and it's one of the reasons why, feeling the fullness of all of it, because there's even grieving about my dad that's been showing up.
Of course.
In a very different way, because I had a recognition not too long ago, and it was before my mom, who's been staying with me now for about 18 months, because we're trying to figure out her next move. Right before she moved in, I can remember sitting at my wishing well table, and people know of my wishing well table, there's magic in this table. And all of a sudden I had this overwhelming sense of grief that came over me. And it wasn't for me. it was for my dad, because it was the first time I felt the level and magnitude of the pain he must have been carrying for the way he projected out, what he projected out. And I wept for him.
Wow, that's huge, because hurt people, right?
Right. And so I think about,
Hurt
but
people.
how beautiful that was.
Oh, it's
And
huge.
it's because there's now times, now right now I'm talking to Peyton, but there were times when Peyton and I would go walking that I would talk to the spiritual version of my dad,
Sure.
talk to who he was underneath all the pain, and like building a relationship with him now in that healing is very different than the relationship I was never going to have in human form.
That's beautiful, because, and the truth is that, as we know, I mean, people say some of these things are woo woo, but this is science. This is energy cannot be destroyed or created, right? So when, and that's like part of my whole message of being proactive. Let's normalize these conversations. Number one thing is, what do you believe about life and death? If you want to navigate this journey we call life, if you want to be able to, and you know, the I Just Showed Up movement, empower yourself and others and be resilient and be able to just show up for yourself in your authentic, messy journey and be able to just show up for others. I believe in that. I have 7 takeaways that I believe are great essential principles. And the first one is, the best time to talk about, plan, and prepare for grief, transitions, and end of life is when we are young and healthy. And the next best time is now. And part of that conversation is digging in to say, what do you believe about life and death? And to get to that understanding where I just say we are physical beings having or spiritual beings having a human experience, not human beings. I mean, we have a timeline, and we do not all die of old age. We do not always get a warning. We do not know what's going on internally, mentally, physically, emotionally with our people, our dogs, our pets. And so we do not know. We don't have to like it, but if we could accept, I don't know how long I'm here. Like I say, and we've normalized that conversation, right? With the kids, like I don't know how long I'm here. I've heard people say, "Oh, don't worry, I'm going to live a really long life." Like, oh, like you're
Right, you don't know if that bus is going to come around the corner. Exactly.
Oh my God. But I believe with all my heart and soul that part of the grief process is figuring out your new relationship. And it's a spiritual relationship, right? It's an energetic spiritual relationship instead of physical. Of course, you're going to grieve the physical presence, obviously.
Right.
If you can understand, or if you accepted, choose to believe something that will help you to navigate this journey. And I believe we stay spiritually connected. I am connected to so many people and pets that have died, and I'll say, okay, I got it. Oh, thanks, Drew, or whatever. And I choose and I acknowledge. And when you talk about grief attacks, that can happen in 10 years too. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe Peyton died 10 years ago, and you're a hot mess like it happened today. And imagine if your beautiful village around you say, oh yes, Candy, God, I know how much you love Peyton. Oh, let's just have a really good cry together. I'm just going to sit. I'm going to cry too, because I'm sad.
Right.
And just created that beautiful, safe space, or just that, I don't know what to say. I'm just going to sit with you. I'm just going to hug you. I'm going to show me pictures.
Or I'm just going to ask, because here's the other thing. People worry so much about, oh my God, do I say that? What if you just asked? Is there any way I can support you right now? Is there anything you need? Do you just want me to hold space for you? You can give yes, no question that says, would you like me to just sit with you?
So it's yes. And also it's yes. And also
it's always a yes and.
Yeah, it's always a yes and, because, when people are so consumed in their grief, sometimes they don't even know the answer.
True.
So if we can be vulnerable, courageous enough to be vulnerable, if I said, I don't know, the right or wrong, I don't really know what to do, or say, I'm going to sit right here beside you.
Yep.
And I'm going to listen, or if you'd like to talk, let me know. I'm just going to be here. And if you need some more space, I'm going to sit over here. And, sometimes it's just showing up and saying, like, again, I will say to people, listen, I need to feel good about myself by just showing up. You got to give me something like, and recognizing the grief is experiencing any heartache, divorce, diagnosis, job loss, mental health issues, whatever it may be. And I believe we cause ourselves so much sadness and anxiety when we do not show up for others, because when you say, oh God, I should have called, I didn't call, oh, I don't know what to do. And then you create this whole big spiral.
Can I offer something in that though, too? Because there's
Yes.
another yes, and I want to add to that. And I do this
Yes.
in my workshops because a lot of grief comes up a lot of times in my workshops, a lot of triggers. And I love that you just said, and I want to call this out because I think it's really important. Yes, I think showing up is important. And showing up, the way people need you to show up, like different grief, I need different things. I'm just going to say, don't show up. I also like that you just said, and I really want to highlight this because I think one of the things, and I know for me personally, this is a huge trigger. And like I've even had conversations when I sat, 13 days by my uncle's bedside again during the transition of my dad's death before Peyton, in ICU. I was his caretaker. I was the one that watched him transition to death. He wouldn't even let the nurses help him. So there was just a whole lot of energy and thing. And when he transitioned, I was kind of whole, and people are like, you're not grieving. I'm like, I just sat by his bed for I went through the journey with him, and it was really beautiful, and holy crap, it was heavy. And I did the stuff, and I've had moments where it's shown up, but there was almost a clean, cycle to that. But I say that because I remember my mom wanting to hug me, and I was like, don't touch me. And I say, so there's a way to show up. And I want to hit on this for just a minute, because you made a comment where you're like, I'm just going to sit here. Or if you need more space, I'm going to sit here, because I do think you still, even when someone's grieving and can't ask for what they need, you need to check in and make sure what you want to offer is okay. Because I will tell you, and this is a huge, and I set my container for my workshops for this reason, because I had this happen where someone was like, well, what am I supposed to do? That person's all upset and I can't hug them. I said, that's about you, not them. And she said, what do you mean? And it turned into a thing. It turned into a thing where I'm like, I'm just going to tell you, I'm one of those people that when vulnerability first shows up for me, when the emotion that I can't even language shows, do not fucking
touch me.
I will come out of my skin, because touch is my love language, which means I need breath before I invite you in my space, because I am feeling beyond vulnerable right now. And I have no bearings, no grounding, and even just saying it literally is such a hot button when someone wants to touch me before I'm ready for them to touch me. When I'm ready, I'm a hugger. Hug is my love language.
I hear you.
So I say that because I think there's a yes and in showing up is absolutely critical. It's amazing to me who showed up and who didn't through this process. Again, and it's not from a judgment. It's just from an
They didn't know how if they didn't.
It's from an observation, because it's not that I don't believe my people in my circle cared about me. I think it's uncomfortable. And I think it's part of where we have the opportunity, right? But there's people that showed up that I'm like, I have to take 14 steps back, because I'm like, woo! Too much of your energy coming into a space where I can't even acknowledge or honor my energy. Yeah. So the fact that you were like, I'm going to sit right here, or if that's not okay for you, I'm going to sit over here. I think giving people that distinction through the process, because there are some people that want to be touched right away. First of all, because some of them want to get it off of them, and they want someone, because I've noticed that. I actually have a rule in my training. You're not allowed to touch anyone that has a trigger until they've had a moment to go through their trigger. And then later you can ask if they would like a hug or something else. But here's the thing, because some people that want the hug want it because they want someone to fix it and take it away from them. And other people like me are like, don't touch me until I can actually figure out what the hell is going on inside of me right now. I'm a hermit. I want to be alone. Do not breathe near me. Like, sit across the room, sit on a phone, be whatever, but at least offer the choice. Because for me, I feel like it's more about you than it is about my grief when you show up the way you need to soothe yourself.
So I'm twitching because I have to tell you what I share in all of every.
So I just had to add that yes and. I'm just.
Oh no, it's a big one, because just showing up isn't about you, right? Just showing up is checking your discomfort at the door, and just showing up And here's what I share. So when I say just show up, what is the greatest thing you can do? Acknowledge and allow their feelings and yours. I am a hot mess. I'm sad. Whatever.
Yep.
Acknowledge and allow their feelings. Don't minimize. Don't try to fix it. And simply just create that safe space, and don't try to, come up with something brilliant to say. And here's my big M that you're going to love. I say, forget the golden rule. And everyone just says, what? Treat people the way you want to be treated.
Yes.
And so that is in my presentation. And I say, I know everyone's upset. We've always loved our golden rule. Here's the thing. I learned this at a beautiful, I doing a keynote. This woman told me this heart-wrenching story. I just went up to her and I was going to give her one of my famous bear hugs. And she said, please don't touch me. I don't like to be touched. I know you're just switching. And I just, you know what? I said, it was like my aha moment. I went, thank you for letting me know that. And then I just sat beside her and talked for 2 minutes. And so I said, we need to come up with, and I said, the titanium rule, TM. We don't need to just show up and treat people the way we want to be treated. We need to just show up and treat people the way they want to be treated. I
Yes,
had to let you know that because it's
right.
huge.
That is what that is so.
It's huge.
First of all, let's just take a moment on that.
Right? It's huge.
Because that right there, every part of my body that's still grieving says that's what grief wants, is just to be seen.
It just
Thank
wants
you
to be
for just seeing me and letting me be me without you needing to make this about you. Yes, I want you to be like, I'm grieving too. This is sad. You can cry with me, all of that. Have your emotions and tell me. Great. And please don't make this about you. And
well, I also,
my standpoint, but I say this for any, and honestly, there's been a lot of aha for me because I'm the person that would go in normally to hug someone.
You too.
I've had to create that rule that says, look, hands off. Because my workshop people were like, and I'm like, I'd have somebody that would always be crying, and they did it because they didn't want to deal with it, and they wanted everybody else to soothe them. I'm like, that person is not sitting in their trigger. They're not feeling it. They're looking for someone else that's bigger, stronger, whatever, to soothe them and take that pain away. This is not the work we're doing. And so we have an opportunity to be in the emotion first.
And also,
we're going to sit and just hold silence, and we're just going to let that person process.
The other piece, absolutely. And there's so much more we could talk about. It's all,
we're gonna have to do more,
right? And so the other piece is, and I would invite everyone to please, so acknowledge and allow their feelings and yours. Don't try to fix it. Don't minimize it, please and thank you. Try not to. At least you can get another dog. At least your dog lives this long. Please don't, anything that starts with at least is not helpful. And the other pieces, and everyone does this, and for the sake of, I don't know why, you tell me that you're grieving your dog, and immediately I'm going to tell you all about when my dog died. I would invite everyone to just hold your story, be present, just show up for them. This is not about you in this moment. You do not have to be a professional. It's okay to be emotional. Create that space. Share the story of your dog if they ask, if they invite. Have you ever gone through this? Yes, I have. If not, let it be about them. And that is the very best thing that you can do, is just show up and be gentle with yourself in that you didn't know how to do this, because that's my whole thing. Let's have these conversations so that you feel better. And that's why I say, I wear my I just showed up bracelet to remind me in all the hard moments that just showing up with heart, humor, and humanness is the very best that I can do. I will get it wrong. And I will say, God, I wish I would have handled that differently. If I didn't show up for someone 5 years ago, I will call them and say, I wish I had been more brave and courageous then and allowed that space. I wish I had done that differently. It's never too late to just show up.
Well, and I love that. I love those 3 H's, right? Especially the human piece of that. And I think that in and of itself, I mean, the knowing, this is the whole, and this is Brene Brown's work, right? The courageous conversations is, I'm going to mess this up. Like
God,
you would
100%.
acknowledge, not because you're going to do it on purpose, but no, I've not done this before. I didn't know how to walk coming out of the gate. I fell down
Yeah, you
repeatedly
got up
until I
again.
learned and got back up. And here's the thing: if this is the first time I'm going to hold space for somebody in a way that looks and feels different, I'm going to fuck it up. Like it's going to get messed up. It's going to happen because honestly, I don't know. And it takes practice and it takes work.
Practice. Get it wrong, practice, brush yourself off.
Sure, but
And
that human piece, and to your point, giving them space, like be gentle with yourself and have as much empathy and compassion for yourself as you are for the person you're trying to, I think it's huge.
it's huge. Big conversations. And isn't it wonderful that we're starting to have them? And I am so grateful to you for taking your pain and being brave enough and courageous enough to just show up for yourself and post what you need to post and share what you need to share. That is your journey. When I see people share, it's like that's what they need to do.
Yep.
I don't need to figure out why. Oh, and let's not get mired in the why. That's the other piece, right? When we go, why did this have to happen? What answer would ever be good enough? So if we can allow someone their journey, if that person's grieving by being quiet, that introvert doesn't want me to just show up, but perhaps I can cut their lawn, or perhaps I can support their supporters. And that's the other thing. I can, their grieving village. And so there's always a way to just show up and know that, yeah, it's uncomfortable and you will get it wrong. Just show up anyway.
Well, and I love that. I talk about leadership. Leadership is a choice, right? And the first fundamental function of leadership is how I choose to show up, how I choose to serve, and how I choose to take personal responsibility. And so the responsibility people have inside of this, when you want to lead in grief, it's my responsibility is, am I willing to show up? Am I willing to be uncomfortable? And know that I can care without carrying. Know that it's not my responsibility to fix it. Know that that's their journey. Know that it doesn't require judgment, comparison. It doesn't require explanation, justification, why. Don't tell me he's in a better place. Don't tell me, like, all of that doesn't serve. Just allow room to breathe into it.
If you can just show up, and that is my superpower, right? Being able to just show up, knowing that I don't really know what to do or say, and I may get it wrong. But I always show up with, I have love, gratitude, and heart, humor, and humanness. I lead with my heart. I just show up, and I know that's the best I can do. So I think we'll have to chat again.
Heart, humor, and
humanness.
God, I love that. So Yvonne, how can people reach out to you? Because the work you do is incredible. You put so much out there that does come from that place of heart, humor, and humanness, especially as we all, and I say all, you cannot have a human experience without grief. You just can't, or you are not showing up and loving in any capacity. It's just not possible. Unless you're a psychopath, you have grief. Seriously.
Well, no, grief and joy can coexist.
What we're here to heal and learn and understand about ourselves. It is part of the journey. And so I would love for you to, what were you going to say? I think you and I were talking at the same time.
I don't know. And it's all right. My website, loveyourlifetodeath.com, has wonderful resources, my TED Talk, and including, I have a weekly show of 30 minutes of archived material, Navigating Grief with Heart and Humor. So people can go to that and watch it on their own time, right? When they don't want to interact with someone, and they can also reach out to me anytime through the website.
She also has a phenomenal book I highly recommend as well. That is also just really brilliant. So please reach out to Yvonne, see all of the fabulous, amazing, just incredible work that she's doing. She has this, as you can see, this incredible light and energy that just radiates and magnetizes the spaces she's in. And I think there's so much opportunity for us to explore and get curious about grief in a very different way, and start being uncomfortable with the fact that it will be uncomfortable, and it's okay. And we don't have to have it figured out. It's just about, as Yvonne says, and everything that she's about is just show up. And so Yvonne, I would love to ask, do you have anything you would love to leave the audience with today? Any last words or ahas or something that you would like to kind of close out this container with?
I will always close up. Thank you so much for creating this beautiful space for us to have this great conversation with the yes ands and I love it. It's just real, and it just feeds my heart and soul. And I always tell people, if you want to be able to just show up for yourself, if you want to be able to just show up for others, the greatest thing you can start with is plan your life, plan your death, and then just love your life to death. And always bring your own tambourines to the party. That's it.
Always bring your own tambourines to the party. I love that. And I love your life to death. Right. And so I just want to say so much. I don't even have words for how much I love you, how much I adore you, how much I appreciate you being one of those people that beautifully has held space for me and in a way that has gotten uncomfortable. And even today, allowing me, I knew this was still going to be raw in spaces. And so I just want to honor and say how much that means to me and how much I love you. So thank you for that. And thank you for sharing your brilliance and your light and your heart and your humor and your humanness with us today. So just thank you so much for that. I love you. And for all of you that have tuned in and are listening, I want to say thank you too, because I do have an incredible amount of gratitude for my audience, for my community, for the people that support me. It has been amazing to me who have been some of the people that have shown up in ways that have just knocked me out in a beautiful way, with the overflowing love and compassion and just considerations in ways that I get to honor and hold my sweet boy close to my heart. And so I just want to say also thank you to all of you that tune in and listen. And I'm so glad we could have this conversation. Yvonne, I would love to have you come back. We can talk more, explore more levels of it. And with that, everybody, please know leadership is always a choice. It is the way you show up. It is the way you choose to serve others. And it's the way you choose to take personal responsibility. And yeah, that's what I'm going to leave you with today. So thank you, everybody. I love you. And we will catch you on the next episode of Aligned as Fuck. Please live your life out loud, live your life proud, and live your life in a space that is authentic. Cheers.